was asking the mayor how he got to be a socialist.
Wow.
And he was saying that he was born in 1912 here in Milwaukee, and he was very much affected by the First World War, and became a socialist through that and through reading. So, Mayor, pick up where I just left off when I asked you how you came to be a socialist. Can you tell us?
I'll repeat that I was affected as a young man, as a boy, by the adverse conditions of the First World War, and I felt that something must be better than that. It was when I was 15 or 16, browsing in the Claiborne Street branch library of the Milwaukee Public Library. I came across the writings of Norman Thomas and Harry Lidler, DeVere Allen, a couple of other people writing at that time on the desire for peace and the bad effects of the First World War, which they were socialists. And there was a socialist movement in Milwaukee that represented the working class. And I lived in a working class neighborhood where there were railroad workers. So I encountered, and by over a period of time, encountered some of them, and through one of them, James T. O'Baird, a fellow they called Cotton Picker because he came from Alabama, was a railroad machinist. I joined the Socialist Party. I was 20 years old. The idea of peace and cooperation that the Socialists preached at the time was attractive to me.
And what was the base of the Socialist Party here in Milwaukee at the time that you joined?
Base of the Socialist Party really was based on German working class. But there were some Polish people in it and some Irish people who were members of that particular party. But they had a socialist movement here in the 70s and 80s of the 19th century, and it was into that movement that Victor Berger, who was an immigrant from Hungary, entered, and he became a leader. He was a powerful figure, powerful mentally, a big figure, had a pen that was very caustic. So he became the leader of the movement, and much of the later movement was simply an extension of his personality.
Was
He and Morris Hillquit were the center of the socialist movement in the 20s and 30s, not the 30s. Victor Berger was killed by walking into a streetcar 2 blocks down, 3 blocks down the street here. But in the 10s and 20s, he and Morris Hillquit of New York were the dominant thinkers in the socialist movement.
How did you get involved in Milwaukee politics?
Well, I joined the socialist branch, so they ran for alderman. And they ran aldermen and county supervisors. They ran a mayoral ticket, a city ticket, and they had a printing press. Berger was able to establish a daily paper. The guy was a business genius. If he had been in private business, he'd have been an extremely wealthy guy. And he built a newspaper, printing press, printing business. And he had close ties with construction trades. And the business agents of the construction trades were often socialists. So I got to know something about it, but only on the periphery. I never knew Berger. Berger was dead before I got to know who he was. Got to know him personally. I knew who he was. before he died.
And did you start getting active in Milwaukee politics after
Well,
you joined when you
I
were
was
20 years old?
Secretary of the branch, and then secretary of the county committee, and then secretary of the state committee, and never got beyond that. I'm still there.
Well, that's pretty good. And when you were active then, what sort of programmatic positions did the Socialist Party take with respect to not just local, but national and international
So the
situations?
Socialist Party members and the Wisconsin Party were a little different. Their party elements were across the country were different in their stresses, and the Wisconsin Party had different stresses than the Illinois Party and the National Party. We were very strongly anti-communist. The big error we made, I think, in the 30s was not detecting what was happening in Germany. We were too focused on communist penetration and the effort of the Leninists to take over the Socialist Party. We spent too much time bucking that and not watching the developments that going on with Hitler in the process. We were anti-war, we wanted, however, we were, I would say, embarrassed in the 1930s. Norman Thomas was a total pacifist, and when Frankel came up, the socialists didn't know quite what to do with him, and wouldn't support Britain and France's putting him down, or the United States, or Roosevelt putting him down. So we were very weak on that issue of what to do with these growing dictatorships over a period of time. And locally, however, socialists focused on clean government. That is, clean streets, housing, industrial support for the workers' compensation, issues like that. And we're always anti-war. If you read the literature, you'll find that it was strongly anti-war.
Were you allied with the Progressive Party at all in Wisconsin?
You have to talk a lot.
Were you allied with the Progressive Party in Wisconsin, since you shared
There
so
was
many
a
of the
competition
same-
between Berger and Robert LaFollette. Robert LaFollette Sr.'s idea was that once you have the open primary, everything would be solved. And the socialists felt that you had to have social ownership. They also were different from the progressives because the progressives wanted regulation of the corporations, and the socialists felt you couldn't regulate them. Ultimately, they'd get control of the regulatory powers.
You were so right.
As early as 1913, 1914, socialists were writing that regulatory powers would be grabbed off by the corporations. And so they were for public ownership. That was the difference between us and the progressives.
I've read that with respect to the race question, that socialists in the early days didn't say it required any special attention because they thought the problems of racial oppression of black people would be solved in passing with the coming of socialism.
Yeah.
But I've also read that you, foremost amongst other people in the Socialist Party, were sensitive to the race question and active with respect to that, and that you took a lot of criticism because of your active position.
That's true. That's true. And when you talk about the race question didn't exist to any extent because there weren't many black people around. mostly the idea was in local politics, where would the block of Polish voters go? Where would the block of Irish voters go? Where would the German voters go? It wasn't until after the Second World War, when the mass migration of African Americans out of the South started to come into the northern cities, that the issue of race became significant. And there was a very interesting thing. The Jewish community was the first to be most sensitive to it, largely because of what was happening in Germany. They said, we don't want any evidences of race hatred going on in the United States. So they were the principal spokespersons for the rights of blacks in the community in the early 1940s. As a matter of fact, I think they had a role in establishing, with the mayor before me, a committee on human rights, which I think came from the Jewish community, pressure of the Jewish community. The Jewish community, however, in Milwaukee was quite integrated with the German community for quite a while, until there was an arrival of Jewish people from Russia and Poland, and that there was a division took place inside that community.
Our great-grandfather was the first kosher butcher in Milwaukee.
Is that so?
Yeah, Jacob Coopersmith was his name. And he lived a little further south of here. He came from Poland, from a little village in Poland. And our family on my father's side was from Milwaukee.
There was quite a movement in the 1880s out of Poland, out of Russian and Polish. Russian government. Poles didn't control anything. It came out mostly out of Eastern Europe. But before that, there had been a German-Polish, German-Jewish migration, which was quite well integrated with the German community. Berger himself, for instance, used to frequently attend the drama on German language things. That was their speech.
When you were mayor from 48 to 1960, looking back at it, what would you say were some of the achievements that you were proudest of, and also what were some of your disappointments and stuff that you weren't able to accomplish?
It's a long story.
We want to hear it.
One of the most astounding achievements is I doubled the size of the city in the boundaries. Between 1948 and 1956, through aggressive annexation and consolidation, we expanded the city of Milwaukee from 46 square miles to 96 square miles. I started the freeway system. I shouldn't say I built, the city of Milwaukee in my time built about 3,200 public housing units, including the first housing for the elderly. It was the housing units that created the impression that this was very attractive for Southern blacks to come in, to bring in housing units. I started the freeway system both here, and I worked with a committee nationally to start the freeway system. I worked to create the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. In 1951, I organized a committee for the first public education television set. Over a period of time, I raised money for the Milwaukee Area Technical College and expanded sites for the Milwaukee public school system. In my time in the late 50s, we built a brand new, complete, large waterworks, several hundred million gallons a day on the south side of Milwaukee. We expanded the area for workers' houses to the north and to the west, and putting the streets, the lighting, everything else without graft. We changed completely the ability to fight snow. We refurbished the fire department, built many new fire stations and police stations over a period of time, bought the last major piece of Lake Michigan front for the public, built piers for St. Lawrence Seaway, worked for the opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway. Those are some of the things that I did.
What a legacy you
Built
left.
a new library, separate library, many branch libraries, and raised the money for a new public museum.
Wow.
Yeah, this was all going on when we were growing up here.
Yeah.
And I remember some of the things
And I,
that you've mentioned.
Built a lot of bridges.
you
Holy
still
Road.
are.
The Holy Road Bridge on the north side, and bridge over South 35th Street, and
Yeah, yeah.
some of the bigger ones. And repaired the 6th Street Bridge. The biggest failure I had was saving electric traction. That I couldn't do.
I remember taking the electric streetcar
I tried to save an electric
in the middle 50s.
electric lines from Milwaukee to suburban communities. I couldn't do it.
What forces were allied against you?
Common council, people riding automobiles.
And
Didn't
you-
want them.
Yeah,
It wouldn't-
no,
wouldn't
I'm
su-
a little
wouldn't
familiar
support.
with the story.
1963, after I was out of office, I was the director of the Wisconsin Department, State Department of Resource Development. Tried to save the electric line between Milwaukee and Chicago, Milwaukee. And
We used to take that.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
failed. Those were the big failures. Didn't have much more to do with airport development, except that I got the airport into the city.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, what do you think are the major concerns today, especially for young people?
Well, in Milwaukee, a major concern is that this is going to be a black community on the north side and a Spanish community on the south side. The question is, what jobs will they have? What happened was that in the period since I left office, a lot of the industrial establishments simply picked up and left or quit, and there aren't the jobs anymore. And the attraction that Milwaukee had for the people from the south to come here to find work in industries and factories wasn't there anymore. And so as a result, you got a large degree of African American unemployment. And there's also not the bridge between the African and American and white community has not been completed. It's not, people get along all right, they get along together, but the next mayor of Milwaukee is not likely to be, and all the public officials are likely all to be African. It's like Detroit. It's going to change completely like Detroit.
Yeah, yeah, for a lot of the same reasons, I think. I used to live in Detroit.
And nobody knows what to do for restoring the industrial loss.
What do you think socialists should be for today?
Well, I think their primary concern is still world peace. One of the things that influenced me when I was in office was I was one of the first civilians to be allowed to see an atomic bomb explosion. And when I went to see that in 1952 at Yucca Flat, Nevada, I was standing next to a guy, I think his name was William L. Lawrence. He was a New York Times science reporter. And he says, when you see this explosion, you're going to see a spiritual thing. I said, what do you mean? He said, I was on a plane behind the drop plane at Nagasaki, and one moment I saw a city, and the next moment it was gone.
Yeah.
And the fact that the United States and Russia each have some 3,000 rockets on high alert, just it ought not be a continual scare to us.
What do you think of the terrible qualitative erosion in civil liberties that's been going on, especially since 9/11?
I don't know how to estimate the Bush administration. I wrote a letter yesterday to somebody that says it's so bad that I can't, I'm not going to write about it, about what they're doing. They're eroding the civil rights, they're eroding public ownership, they're reflecting a kind of an internal selfishness, I think, that unfortunately is a part of human nature. That we want things for ourselves, we want control. I just recently, now, before you came, looking at literature I got from the Birch Society, saying that the worst thing we ever did was have public schools. And this idea of privatizing everything for selfish purposes is what is very troubling.
That leads me to my next question. It's something
Yeah.
that Bob and I have been discussing, and that's the awful irony of the fact that you had people in Milwaukee, foremost was you as the mayor, who wanted to have public schools and wanted to have a social safety net for less fortunate people, and wanted to, at least as far as you could, on a municipal level, redistribute things so people have a better quality of life. And here in the same town where you and the rest of these fine people were trying to accomplish something, you had Allen Bradley Industries, and you have them, setting up this charity. Now it's called the Lynd and Harry Bradley Foundation, and they are
They're
an extremely wealthy charity, one of the wealthiest in the country, and they are the ones that are principal underwriters for the neoconservatives who are trying to take away all the things that you were trying to accomplish, starting with public schools, with the voucher system.
Allen Bradley and the Bradley Foundation is only one of several foundations that are doing that, and they've been very successful. But what is more troubling to me is the fact that the socialist movement, in order to take care of the working class, provided in Milwaukee County and Milwaukee City the benefits of housing and support for aid for dependent children and so on. And this was considered to be a magnet to bring in African Americans from southern states, which I think it did in a very large measure. And in other words, the socialists were being hoisted on their own petard. They created an environment that was attractive enough so that there was began to get overflowed with people who had less advantages and wanted to take advantage of them. To a certain extent, this is happening now in Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's delayed, but it's happening because of the support system. That hurt movement. But Alan Bradley, interestingly enough, had a communist union. And they had a sweetheart arrangement between themselves. The communist union wouldn't give them trouble if they let them operate.
And that was
United Electrical Workers.
that was the United Electrical Workers, which was also not an integrated workforce.
Yeah.
Alan Bradley had 7,000 employees and about 20 or 30 black employees.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's I know it's a real irony.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, there was also a very interesting thing that the major radicals now are no longer the socialists or people of that caliber. They're Catholic liberals. Catholic Church, which had, in my time, was very staunchly opposed to anything like socialization or things of that type, nevertheless has developed a group of people in this city who are extremely radical in their attitude toward race relations and white people and so on. And they seem to be the advance guard right now.
Are you referring to Father Grappi and the people
I knew him
in
well.
his tradition?
Yeah,
You knew him well? Huh?
yeah.
And did you collaborate with him politically?
I didn't work with him, but I worked with his associates, Gene Blythorn, Father Gene Blythorn, and Father, what is his name? Pat Flood, and Father Jim, can't think of the name. I worked with them back in the 1960s. Grappi was assigned to an ultra-conservative German church just about half a mile from here, St. Boniface, and in one decade that became the most radical Catholic parish. And you must say this about the Archbishop Cousins, he didn't rein those guys in.
Yeah. Well, Milwaukee had a very progressive
Yeah.
bishop just recently.
Well, the church was busy at that time making contacts with Africans in Africa.
Yeah, I only know a few words of German, like Lieb and Gott, and I can't translate this
Oh, that's
you have on the wall. Can you tell me what it says in German and translate it
that's
for me in
something
English?
My wife's father did. He was a person of German extraction from Lithuania. He may have been I read about it now, he may have been a Salzburg, but I can't, let me see if I can read it from here, my eyes are bad. Wo Glauben da Liebe, where there's belief, there's love. Wo Liebe da Friede, where there's love, there's peace. Wo Friede da Segen,
Yeah.
there's, for peace, there's blessing. Wo Segen da Gott, there's, where blessing, there's God. And then the last one is where there's God, there's no need.
Oh, nice.
He did that when he was 17 or 18 years old.
When did your parents come to Milwaukee?
They were born here.
Really? And your
Oh,
grand
my
your
mother
grandparents?
was born here, and my father was born here. But they're people, a mixture. The Zeidlers come from western Czechoslovakia, in Sudetenland.
Uh-huh.
It means beekeeper,
Huh.
the name.
Ah.
My father's mother came, however, from Hohenborg in North Germany. My mother's father came from Brandenburg, from Fietz, in the province of Brandenburg. And my mother's mother came from Darmstadt in Hesse.
And
And we're mixed now, very mixed. I don't identify with any of those people, with any of those elements.
why is that?
Well, I've lived here too long.
I always identified just from reading with the 48ers that came over here, though. And I imagine you did too.
Yeah, there weren't too many 48ers that came, but they were very influential. And Karl Schurz was one.
Well, of course, yeah.
Most
Yeah.
prominent of the
Yeah.
German 48ers.
Yeah.
And there was, I think, a 48er or somebody like him, Lieber, who wrote for Lincoln, the international, how to treat prisoners internationally.
Uh-huh.
Where the 48ers had a bigger influence was in St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
St. Louis, culturally, in a lot of ways, is more interesting than Milwaukee because of the elements that it represents there. Represents Missouri Synod, very conservative German element. It represents German Catholic philosophers, German freethinkers. All were down there in St. Louis.
Huh.
They still leave their traces down there too.
In what way?
Names of people in business and so on, who carry on their tradition.
You know, I just got a book about the Siegel Regiment
Yeah.
that were Germans that organized soldiers to fight for the Union and went down
That was
south
in
in
New
the
York.
Civil War.
I think that was in New York. Wasn't it?
Yeah. Who were veterans of the failed struggle in Germany.
Well, in the
48.
Civil War, about 1,000 Milwaukeeans were killed.
Wasn't that many?
In one German Catholic church, St. Joseph's, where my Zeidler family went, they lost 25 young men.
Really?
Milwaukee Turners were free thinkers. They lost 25 men. It's interesting, you go to the Turner Hall and see so-and-so was killed in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Yeah.
It's got his name up there, Turner.
Yeah.
That's where my daughter is the mayor.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
She's mayor. How long has she been mayor?
4 or 5 years.
Oh, is she going to carry on your tradition and be
Well,
mayor for several decades?
I don't know, it's not my, she's smarter than I am.
Why? In what way?
Oh, she got more diplomatic and is able to work with groups very well. She's a very small lady, but she knows her way around. Got a good sense of things. Got it from her mama.
Yeah. But she went into her father's business. And I thought you had a daughter that lives here in Milwaukee, Clara. Am I right?
Oh, my daughter Clara?
Yeah.
Yeah, she lives here. She was here, but she went back to work.
Oh,
She works at for a medical clinic.
yeah. Well, you have 3 daughters?
5.
Wow.
You have 5 daughters? And do they consider themselves politically in line with you?
Well, one of them is politic. 2 of them are politically minded. The others aren't.
What are you reading these days? Books, magazines? What are your interests?
All kinds. Here's one that's murderous.
Which one?
The Modern Mind. There's another book that was written by, I think a fellow's named Smith or Brown, on IBM and their control, their ties with the Nazis.
Yeah.
Give me a book, it's in one of those books there. And some of those books up on top, you can get some idea. Books come in faster than I can look at them.
Well, here's
People give me books to read.
E.P. Thompson,
Huh?
a book about Bulgaria in 1944.
Somehow We Survive, an anthology of South African writing.
Marianne Williamson, Healing the Soul of America, Reclaiming Our Voices as Spiritual Citizens.
There's one book that one of my religious friends gave me. It's written by a guy named Rick Warren, who has got the biggest Protestant congregation. God has a role for you, but I'm afraid to write back and say, yeah, what was God's role for all the people that got killed in the Indian Ocean tsunami?
Yeah, I know. People told me when I told them that I was almost killed at 9/11. They told me, well,
It's God's will that you were
that,
not.
it was, God saved you, and they don't think about the next question.
Yeah.
America's Black Congressman,
Who's that?
and the biography of
This house is
Niles
stuffed
Bohr.
with books.
Yes.
Stuffed with books everywhere.
Yeah, it certainly
There's
is.
a lot of books right there that deal with the socialist movement, the old time movement, and
Oh, look, a liberal in city government. My experiences as
I'm a
mayor of
railroad
Milwaukee.
This is, yeah, we know about
This
this.
is it.
I'm a railroad buff, so I got some railroad books.
Oh, do you?
I worked on the railroad when I was younger.
What was your job on the railroad?
Worked in the engineering department of Milwaukee terminals.
Ah,
Laid out track and did stuff like that.
yeah. This is the book we read about.
I know, I'd like to have a copy.
So would I, and I'll tell you how we do it.
How do we do it?
www.milwaukeepublishers.com, and that's how we'll get a copy of a liberal and city government.
Oh, that's the new one that Dean Andrade and Jamie Bjorkman put out.
Yeah, we read an article in the Milwaukee Sentinel about the book,
Yeah,
and
that's partial, that's part of a big manuscript. I
this is
guess.
the first 3 chapters,
Yeah.
and we're looking for
Part
the
of a
last-
big manuscript.
Yeah, yeah. I know. We don't want to tire you out, so you tell us
Well,
time out.
what do you need
whenever
to
you
know?
want.
Okay, we gotta find out some of the famous people in the 50s that when you were mayor, like Golda Maier. Did you know her when she was
Yeah,
teaching
I
at
met
North
her once.
Division? Oh, okay.
And her big thing was, I'll never come back to Milwaukee.
Oh, really? Why is that?
So I didn't like it.
She's glad to leave.
I know 2 of her friends. One was Ruth Shapiro, who went to school with her, or Ruth Shapiro's sister. But Golda Maier didn't like it. That's the most I know about her. She was a powerful woman. That she survived one of those wars is baffling. Yeah.
How about
But I can't say I was close to her.
How about Joe McCarthy?
I knew her real well.
Really?
I couldn't understand, and to this day, don't understand how anybody ever took him serious on anything.
Well, Eisenhower said anybody that's an ex-Marine and a chicken farmer can't be all bad.
No, I just, Joe was a big faker. You know, it was clearly that was what he was, how they took him seriously. That's probably a weakness on our part here. We didn't take him as seriously as other people did. But he never attacked anybody in Wisconsin. Matter of fact, a few weeks before he died, I was with him at a meeting. And Senator Nolan, the Republican senator
Yeah,
from
California.
California, wouldn't talk to him, but I would talk to him and discuss stuff with him. But he was, he's a strange guy. But he sure had the Irish following behind him in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
If his name had been Joe Schultz or something like that, he'd have got anywhere. But having Joe McCarthy with the New York baseball, Joe McCarthy and so on, that helped him a long ways.
How about Robert LaFollette
Well, I knew Robert LaFollette Jr.
Jr.?
Yeah.
I didn't know Robert LaFollette Sr. Robert LaFollette Jr. was a very fine man, one of the finest senators I know. I didn't know his brother Phil. Phil got trapped later on into doing something that made him look like he was following Hitler. With his national progressive movement that had a cross that on a button that looked like a portion of a swastika. I don't know who, and Robert LaFollette Sr. never curbed Phil, and that was a major blunder.
Did Robert LaFollette Jr. commit suicide?
Yeah.
Was it what?
Well, he had hepatitis, and I had hepatitis when I was in office of mayor, and that makes you very depressed. I think that's what did it. But he was just a real good guy.
One of the theories I heard that he committed suicide because he gave up the seat to Joe McCarthy. Was that accurate or not?
No,
No.
I think he did it because he was sick. But not Joe. However, Bill Ebu, the editor of the Capital Times,
Yeah.
went after Joe McCarthy and brought him down.
What about Bill Renquist, William Renquist? Did you know him?
Who, Judge Renquist?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about him except I know his Sunday school teacher. He just recently died. Carter Wells taught him Sunday school at Plymouth Congregational Church. He wanted to go and see him, and Renquist wouldn't go see him.
No kidding.
He went to school about 1.5 miles from here. But I never met him.
Yeah, he's from Shorewood.
Yeah. My mother played bridge with his mother.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh.
You're going to see a terrible explosion in the Senate when Mr. Bush tries to put a replacement for Bill Renquist.
Yeah.
It's almost a civil war.
One thing I want to find out, if you can reminisce or philosophize about what the 50s, what was significant about the 50s that we could use today, in today's culture.
The optimism of the 50s that everybody was going to be able to have a house and an automobile and overcome the conditions that existed from 1929 to the end of the war.
Yeah.
That was the optimism that things would go on the same. And the big surprise was the internal migration of African Americans. That was like two-plate tectonic, Pacific plate meeting the North American plate, blowing up mountains. It created disruption all through the cities of America. In Milwaukee, the first evidence of that was when they had a large number of black kids. They had to take out the fireboxes because these kids were pulling the fire alarms. So they don't have any fireboxes anymore. The next thing is they got to integrate the schools. So they integrate the schools, and now the pressure in the black community is separate schools. And those were unexpected. Another background thing is the failure to understand what damage can be done to cities and clusters of people, and to rebuild and to construct again as if that's never going to happen again. And it hasn't now for over 50 years, when they were predicting in the 50s that an atom bomb would explode in another 50 years. But it hasn't. But who knows? And so those were things that we looked at. However, there were technical changes that took place. And the biggest technical change that I didn't get smart to during my time was the introduction of computerized technology. They started to use it in the city government, and I didn't fully comprehend what they were doing, and especially using punch cards. You know, who's the guy that wrote the book that Hitler operated on punch cards? And it's how they were able to kill all the people by having his IBM punch cards.
That's right.
And I didn't tumble to that soon enough. I should have been told, take off for 1 month and go to school. I should have done that, didn't know that. That was a tremendous changes that took place technologically. Later on, after I got out of public office, I taught at the university off-campus courses on technology, values, and society. When I tumbled on what was happening to society with the new technological changes. I ran across a German book that said anything that could have a computer part in it would have it. How right they were.
Yeah.
That was 20, 30 years ago. I ran across that. Another thing is that when I was teaching that, the big change was in biological developments. A couple of guys wrote books. One, an Englishman, I can't think of his name now. Another fellow, University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, wrote a book called BioBabel, saying that the biologists are starting to invent life and interfere with life, and what are we going to do technologically and legally to cope with what's happening. And that, the big change in the future is biological expansion.
Yeah, I agree.
It's true.
Mhm.
I talk too much.
That's
Oh.
that's what we're here
No,
for.
you don't.
No, not at all.
Keep still.
One question, as a teacher, did you ever come across any of the Wisconsin, the great staff, the history staff at Wisconsin, like George Mossey or Michael Petrovich or
No.
Heseltine?
Petrovich, I used to listen to. He had wonderful lectures on Marx on the radio. But the earlier guys, Heseltine,
Yeah.
and I don't remember meeting Curdy, I can't think of that. Professors in the 30s and 40s. Heseltine is one. There's another one that I can't think of at the present time. I used to run into quite a bit. They were members of the Socialist Party.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be now. A lot of the socialists moved over to become left Democrats. Franklin Roosevelt's legislation
Yeah, well, that was the
Changed-
competition
changed them.
with the
and
Socialist Party.
Changed the labor leadership. Labor leadership went from socialist members to business agent types.
Yeah.
Does a socialist stand a chance in Milwaukee now?
Anyone?
Does a socialist stand a chance in Milwaukee now?
No.
No.
Not in the black community and not in the Mexican community, and those are the voting blocks now.
Did you know Mayor Norquist? You must have.
Sure.
Sure.
Well,
What'd you think of his term? I was running.
he was good on civil rights, but he was a privatizer, which I didn't like. I knew his father much better than he did, and he was a good friend of his father. His father was a Presbyterian minister who survived 4 years in a Japanese prison camp after the Bataan Death March.
Hmm.
But I thought John would be more progressive and more liberal. And instead he turned to be quite conservative.
I just took a bicycle ride around downtown Milwaukee, about 20 miles yesterday, and I've never seen so many condos being built in different areas. Right near the old Schlitz factory, 3rd Ward, the development there is incredible, really. Who is behind most of that?
John Norquist helped us, however, work on foreign policy. We had the United Nations Association that he supported. Well, largely it's because of his father's experience. His father was a member of it. He had a good family. He came from a good family.
So where do you think all this privatization is going to lead this country? What would you predict is going to happen in this country?
Well, I predict you might have a collapse in the housing market. And how that will affect, I don't know what the rest of it is going, but privatization is certainly becoming very strong. They want to privatize the schools. They privatized the Milwaukee Public Museum, and the thing went broke. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the director just resigned.
they privatized social services. A big privatizer in the Milwaukee area is Milwaukee County. Turning everything over to private contractors. And I think that it's going to exist for quite a while.
Are any of those buildings that I saw on my bike ride, are they affordable housing? Downtown and...
They started at around 170,000. That's
Wow.
not affordable housing.
No, that's
There's
not
no such
affordable.
thing, affordable housing, unless it's public housing.
Oh.
That's all the most I could say.
Yeah, it's true. It's not profitable to build.
Well, there's an inclusionary mandatory zoning, which is sweeping the nation.
Pardon me, there's what?
Inclusionary
The one
mandatory
thing-
zoning
the one
is the
thing
only
that
way to
I
get affordable housing
was
into new
very
construction
wrong
these
on.
days. Madison just
I hate to say
incorporated it.
that.
I'm from Madison,
I
Wisconsin.
felt
We
that
just
the black
incorporated it
community
into our
needed
city.
a great deal of
Inclusionary zoning
help from the white
made mandatory.
community.
So
And
a
I
certain number of
discovered
units in a new project
now,
have to
after
be
a period of
affordable.
time,
And
that the black
affordable
community
is
is
a number
very
that's established,
capable
of
of
according to
meeting
the average
its own
income
needs.
of
Yeah.
that community. So that's the key.
Right.
The average income of the community.
When you see a lot of new housing here that's done by black churches, the big influence in the black community are the black clergy.
Yeah.
And the churches are, when you see new housing, that's largely black church money that's been able to get federal money to produce the housing. So I always thought the blacks were helpless. They're not helpless at all. They're got some very capable people among them.
Did you know Howard Fuller, school superintendent?
Howard Fuller is a guy that I have, speak to on friendly terms, but I don't agree with him at all.
Is that right? Why?
Hi there.
Well, he was a public school system and he's attacking it. He's working with Marquette University to attack the public school system.
because of the voucher system and.
Yeah,
He aligned himself with Mayor Norquist and the Bradley Foundation
Oh,
to
yeah.
privatize, yeah, for voucher, the big voucher
Yeah.
movement here in Madison.
Voucher.
Howard Fuller sold
voucher
out.
system is.
Okay.
But,
And several
you
other
know, an
like
argument could be made for the voucher system. If it weren't, you wouldn't have any white people in the city at all. They wouldn't send their kids to the public schools with blacks.
Yeah, that's true.
So, white kids are going to church schools.
Yeah.
Did you know Gene Posner?
I knew of them.
Uh-huh. Did you know Bacall? George Bacall?
Yeah,
He's still around. He's having trouble seeing, but he did that development.
yeah, George Bacall was
Uh,
Sometimes I felt that some of Bacall's agents were among those that said, sell your house, Frank Zeidler's bringing blacks in.
So do you think that you would advise young people to still maintain a socialist vision
Yeah.
for the United States?
It can't hurt them. They won't get rich. Although there have been members of the Socialist Party that made millions. But for the most part, they would get rich. But the whole idea of human cooperation and working with human beings to try to defeat the forces of nature that work against us seems to be still a valid thing. The other option is to say that we're all forced by nature to fiercely compete with each other and to replicate at the extent of anything around us. And so if you get to that one, you're back into the jungle.
Yeah. Absolutely. Does anybody have any
Huh?
last thoughts or questions before we let the mayor relax after giving us an
I
hour
hate
and
to
10
wait.
minutes of his
I
time?
didn't hear enough about your lives. So,
Where did you go to college?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that.
huh?
Where did you go to college?
I didn't go to
That's
college.
what I was wondering. Where did you go to high school?
I took 85 credits by correspondence from the University of Wisconsin. I started at Marquette University in 1930. I started in 29, but I was deathly sick. And in the 1930s, I matriculated at Marquette, but before the semester was out, I got pleurisy, and again, I was deathly sick. Then the depression set in. So I started to educate myself by taking correspondence study courses from the University of Wisconsin. And I took about 85 credits that way. The credits of courses in math, government, and various German, English. Those are easy courses to get credits. But I never got beyond 85 credits because I fell into the office of mayor. And now as I think about it, I'd have been darn smart to stay home on Saturdays and work on correspondence courses and forget trying to combat the Journal and the Sentinel for what they were going to attack me on Sunday.
So why did you choose not to run for a fourth term?
What's that?
You served 3 terms. You chose not to run for a fourth term as
Oh, I
mayor?
just got worn out.
Mm.
I just got worn out. I had no major support. And when I ran for mayor in 1956, just 2 businessmen supported me.
Mm.
My cost was $25,000. Now it's $1 million to run for mayor.
Yeah.
And,
But who was it that voted for you? Because you were very popular. How do
I
you
don't
account
know.
for it?
I think a big part of the fact was that my older brother was killed in the war and was a hero. He was very nice looking guy, and he was on a ship that the German submarine U-159 torpedoed off of Cape Town. And it blew the whole ship up and blew him up with the crew and armed guard. And that was a major factor, my name. And then it got a lot of relatives named Zeidler that helped.
The relatives voted for you.
And the clergymen. A lot of clergymen supported me.
There was a
Karen?
whole,
I helped establish the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee. Unfortunately, I can't go to their meetings anymore because I'm out of shape. But there we had 13 or 14 now judicatories that meet and have a common civic social program. Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee. That's a subject worth a topic of its own.
Yeah. When was the Frank Zeidler building
It's a
named?
municipal building that was built in 1958-59, and most of the design of it was worked by the fellow who worked with me was Art Solstein. He was an assistant city attorney, but my close friend, and he worked on the building. It was called the Municipal Building. And every night we'd put the piling down, and in the morning it'd come back up 6 inches. And they didn't know what to do anymore. I said, go and build on it anyway. So that's what, 1950, it's almost 50 years ago. It's still standing.
He brought Milwaukee a World Series too in baseball.
Yeah, I helped get
58.
the Braves here.
yeah.
Small role, of inducing Lou Perini to put the Braves in Milwaukee instead of Toronto, and I regret it.
You regret it.
Why, because they
Why?
left us?
Huh? Oh,
Why?
we should have built our own team here.
Uh-huh.
Not
Are you for
steal it from-
municipal ownership of?
Not